Okay, let's reconvene. I think we sold 15 boats so far. I was told that a little while ago out there, so get them while they last. We won't have the first one available for delivery for about a year, but people are getting 10% off, whatever that means, who order one, and I've ordered one myself, and things are going well in the other room, and we only got 7 questions, which is the new low in the first half, so we'll try and move a little faster. I can't imagine why it went that slowly. I mean, who's doing all that talking? Okay. Station 4.
Hi, Warren and Charlie. I'm Jeff Malloy, shareholder from San Francisco. In recent years, American companies have taken on a more active role in the political realm, whether it is speaking out against specific bills or promoting various social causes, often at the behest of shareholder or employee groups. While the goals of these movements can be laudable, they risk alienating significant portions of customer and employee bases. How should CEOs decide which issues to take a stand on, or whether their companies should engage in the political realm at all? Thank you.
That's a terrific question. And that is one, obviously, I've had to think about plenty. And at one point, I said, I don't put my citizenship in a blind trust when I take the job as CEO of Berkshire. But I've also learned that you can make a whole lot more people sustainably mad than you can make temporarily happy by speaking on any subject. And on certain subjects, they will take it out on our companies. And that means that the people that are employed by us, some of them we would end up letting go. It means that the shareholders get hurt. And do I really think that it's so important that I talk on every possible subject that people can get very upset about, whether they should be asked to pay that price? And I've come to the conclusion the answer is no. Why in the world do I want to hurt the people in that other room that do all kinds of things for Berkshire? Why do I want to hurt you because I say something that 20% of the country is going to instantly disagree with, and sometimes they will be so upset about it that they will try and take it out. And since they can't scream at me, they may have campaigns against their companies or anything else. So I think it applies to me. I'm not going to go around and take positions where instead of saying Warren Buffett says, it will say, Berkshire Hathaway or Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway. I get it identified, and I do not want to make the lives of you and I just decided I'm not going to be doing that. And if I want to do that, I should quit my job. And if I think my citizenship, speaking out, is that important, I'll give up what I love the most, which is having this job. I don't want to do that. So I've decidedly backed off. I don't want to say anything that will get attributed basically to Berkshire and have somebody else bear the consequences of what I talk about. And so that's where I stand. And I can tell you that at most companies, or many, that isn't fair, but in a great many companies, the CEOs, they have to think about what their board says to them, and they've made a point of electing people to their boards because it's socially acceptable, who represent different constituencies, sometimes very strongly. And if they think they're stakeholders for this group and that group and that group, they'll get pressured by their boards to take positions, and it's just a territory that we're not going to get into. Charlie, how do you feel about that?
Well, even more than you, I have to be very careful about what I say.
Now, and the difference between the two of us is I can't resist saying a little more. I see headlines in papers just time after time after time that say, Buffett's buying such and such. Well, I'm not buying such and such. Berkshire Hathaway is buying it, and it may be the work of two other people that work at Berkshire. And the people who write the articles don't have the faintest idea whether it was at my instigation or whether I'd even ever heard of it. And but the headline will attract more people if it says Buffett buying this than if it says Berkshire Hathaway and we don't know whether it's the people that work for him or him. And the headline is designed to bring people into the story. So the confusion is terrible. And the easiest thing to do is to basically shut up and not have a bunch of people facing consequences that they didn't ask for in the first place. So with that, but I'm glad you asked that question. That is a good question, and I probably thought more about that question than I think about whether this stock or that stock is cheap. And with that, we'll go to, let's see, that was station 4. We'll go back to Becky.
On that note, let's go to a question from David Cass. He writes in, President Biden's fiscal 2023 budget request would impose a 20% minimum tax on the unrealized capital gains for households worth at least $100 million. What are your views on this issue? And if you don't want to answer, maybe Charlie does.
Well, we'll find out. And we should, in all honesty, we should both say that we would be affected by it. If it's 100 million, we'd both be affected. So our point of view is, and I have no point of view. Charlie, I have no point of view that I would want attributed to.
I tend to stay out of the income tax things like this. My policy is I pay whatever taxes they pass, and I don't want to engage in lobbying about taxes.
Yeah, and I would add one thing. Lobbying is really distasteful. I once did it for a candidate, and I ended up in a room with a bunch of lobbyists for cigarette companies. They didn't care about Nebraska. They didn't care about it. They were there because they were handing over a contribution. And I was a convenient accessory. And it made you want to throw up, basically. On the other hand, we operate in the railroad business, energy business, insurance business, and they're extensively regulated. And I don't also want to be the only railroad that stays out of the railroad group, the only insurance company that stays out of the insurance group. So, other people can rightly figure that we're a free rider under those circumstances. So I tell the managers generally, don't spend Berkshire's money on candidates that you like. Don't pressure suppliers to do it. I mean, Berkshire is not a weapon to use, and been used by certain people in the organization, but don't use it to muscle money out of anybody else for who you like or what school your wife went to or whatever it may be. And some of it goes on anyway. But I don't tell our people that don't belong to any trade associations. Charlie wrote one of the great letters of all time. And if you go to search, type in, I think, 1989, Munger, savings and loan or something. We resigned from the U.S. Savings and Loan League, I guess it was, and we warned them. We said, we just cannot stand, what you're doing to the country. And when a bunch of very nice people get together, but they decide it's in the interest of their savings and loan to do this or that. And we warned them, and finally Charlie wrote a letter, which is, like I say, available on search. And it's should be one of the proudest letters, certainly one of the proudest letters that's ever come out of Berkshire. And he just said, we can't stand it anymore, and we're resigning. And but that's a very tough thing to do. You can't. It's a tough way to live, to just go around criticizing the people you work with and the neighbors, and they're perfectly decent people, but they run into institutions that are doing things that are very distasteful to them, and we support some of our subsidiaries in energy, and I don't want to find people who are doing it for personal reasons. I mean, in that case, they're in trouble. But I don't say they can't do it, because I don't want their hands tied if something comes up, and essentially either they're competitors within the industry or the industry versus this. We're not going to stand alone and say, well, we're morally superior to us, so you put your money up and fight it. So that's where I end up. Charlie?
I've got nothing to add.
Okay. It never bothers me when I don't have anything to add, but he seems stuck on that. Anyway, Becky, did that come from you?
It did.
Yeah, okay. Then station 5.
Oh, thank you, Warren and Charlie. My name is Tong Yao. I'm from China and now studying in the University of Chicago. I really admire you two, especially Charlie. You are my idol since I was a child. And my question is also for Charlie. My question is how to practice the multidisciplinary framework in making investment decisions and in life. Like how to make it more practical. Thank you.
Charlie?
Well, obviously, it helps you to know more than one discipline. There's an old saying, that a man who carries only a hammer thinks everything else is a nail. And you make a lot of wrong decisions if you don't have some command of all the disciplines. That's all I ever said. But you do irritate people terribly when you come into their territory. You say, I'm multidisciplinary, you're the expert, and I know better than you. They hate you for it. I can attest to it. I've done it several times.
Yeah, and China, well, to a certain degree, they have a culture that to some extent reveres age. So Charlie's got me beat. I don't even try and compete with him on China. I can't catch him on age. Okay. I'm going to try to, though. Let's see, we've got Becky coming next.
Mm-hmm. This question comes from Philip King. He writes, in the 70s, you wrote an article entitled, How Inflation Swindles the Equity Investor. You said that stocks cannot keep pace with inflation because companies cannot increase the return on equity. Do you believe that this is still the case?
Yeah, of course, bonds can swindle the equity investor too. Everything, inflation, I should say, swindles the bond investor too, and it swindles the person who keeps their cash under their mattress. It swindles almost everybody, and the problem, if you have a business that doesn't take any capital, and let's just say the dollar depreciates 90% or something, so things cost 10 times as much. If it doesn't take any capital, you can charge 10 times as much, and you've kept your relative position. But most businesses take some capital. If our utility business, if just say that the dollar is worth 1/10 some years hence from now, we have to have 10 times the capital investment, basically. And we get paid a return on that. But we have forced capital investment to essentially keep them in the same place. And I wrote an article that related to that. And I will tell you one famous story, which you will all sympathize with, and that I wrote that story for Fortune, and when I finished it, it was about 7,000 words. And Fortune didn't like publishing 7,000 words, and they had my friend Carol Loomis explain that to me, knowing that I would pay more attention to her than anybody else, but being stubborn and male, I said, every word is precious, and they can either run it or not. So then they sent an editor, a very nice guy, out to Omaha, and this guy explained to me that it just wasn't right to use that many words. And I said, well, that's fine, but if you don't do it, I'll write it someplace else or whatever. Very disgusting behavior on my part. And then I sent it. It was beginning to bother me a little. So I sent it to my friend Meg Greenfield, and Meg was a great, great, great editor at the Washington Post, and we were very, very good friends. Wonderful woman. And Meg, who was tough as nails with most writers, but she was kind of nice. She didn't want to really hurt me too much. So I said, well, Meg, what do you think? And she said, well, Warren, she says, you don't have to tell everything you know in this article. and it made the point. And so I write that article shorter, and but I'd say more or less the same thing. No, you're better off if you really could have a totally stable unit of a monetary use for the next 100 years. It would be better for business and investors in general. Charlie? No? We will go to Station 6. Inflation is, the question is how much, and the question is whether you can decide that 2% and keep it. The answer is nobody knows. You do not know, and nobody knows. You can listen to all kinds of stuff, but nobody knows how much inflation there will be over the next 10 years or 20 years or 50 years or next month. And people talk about it all the time because you're interested in knowing the answer to your question. And they don't know the answer, but there are a lot of people that will tell you they know the answer if you pay them enough, and other people that will tell you for nothing because they think it enhances their prestige and makes them more valuable and all that. But the answer is they don't know, and we don't know either. The best protection against inflation, though, still is your own personal earning power. If you play the violin very well, you will do reasonably well during inflation. I mean, play it better than other people. People will pay you for doing that if all kinds of things. So your skills will not be taken away. and your money maybe. Okay, station 6. Oh, wait a second. Was that?
That's right.
Is it Becky next? Becky?
That's right. It's station 6.
Yeah, station 6, okay.
My name is Martin Wiegand. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger, thank you for your lifetime of teachings and for hosting us back in Omaha this year.
Well, thank you.
You have mentioned that companies get the shareholders they deserve. And in this year's letter, you mentioned a great satisfaction of yours is working for the individual long-term shareholders. With the growing influence of institutional index funds, how can management teams foster a shareholder culture like the one we have at Berkshire? Thank you.
Well, fortunately, we have it. And we know more about how to keep it than to institute one. And it's very interesting. We have 1,470,000 Class A shares outstanding today. That's fewer than we had a year ago in there. Those seats are filled. I mean, the shareholders are in place. We like the group we have. So why in the world, when we got a fixed number of seats, should we go out and recruit other people to replace you? I mean, the ideal shareholder group we can have is the group we have today. And if we had a church, we'd want the people to keep coming back week after week after week. If we had a limited number of seats and we had some wonderful parishioners, and we would not go out and recruit another 50 or 100 of them and have to throw out 50 or 100 of the ones we already had. Every company I know virtually, is wooing new people to come in, and whether they're improving the group they get or not is another. I mean, it strikes us as basically crazy. We don't want anybody different than we have now, and we're not going to get rid of the index funds, so we have to get rid of people like you, and we don't want to get rid of people like you. And I just don't understand why if you had a neighborhood and the size of the terrain or whatever it was would be such that you could have 10 neighbors and they were all great neighbors, why in the world would you go out and say to a whole bunch of people going up and down the street, why don't you buy the house of the guy next to me? It is weird, but there's an awful lot of people who make their living by doing that, and they never really question. I would sort of ask any company that's making analyst presentations every month or something, which of the present ones are you trying to get rid of? Basically, because you're not going to have more. I hope you're not going to have more shares outstanding at the end of the year than you have now. And am I supposed to, get out of the way so some other fund that is thinking about what your stock is going to do next week replaces me? It is a very, very, very weird situation. And of course, the really crazy process that has developed is people talking to, we'll say, analyst group, the sort of the high priests of finance. Some companies are doing it more than once a month. Well, just imagine if you work for that company, you go to work for that company, and every month people are repeating these things about their company, that it's important that we have more services per customer, and it's 6.2 and we got to get to 7 or something like that. And they'd say that month after month after month. It becomes a catechism. And CEO says it, or his or her representative says it, and it goes, how do you go on the next month and say, by the way, we were really wrong, and this is what we should be working on. You don't say that. And it's a terrible problem that the new CEO has coming in after a previous CEO has said the important thing to do is to hit your earnings targets. Well, you know, he's been meeting them in all probability by cheating from time to time. And this guy hands you the baton, and are you going to come out and say, well, we've really been cheating a little and it's really counterproductive to the development of the companies, not to make earnings projections and just to give you the results as they come rather than making up a few things in the accounting department? They can't do it. You can't. It's not human nature. And besides, you wouldn't get appointed as a successor, but you just don't go in and say, we've been perpetuating these myths that we can always deliver 8% growth, or we can do this or do that, or that the most important thing is this. You can't go in and change that if every month you've been preaching to people that this is what we stand for, and just ask another question and carry this message out to the masses, to the analysts and all that. And it's a totally destructive policy. I mean, I can, within GAAP accounting, and I can play a lot of games with numbers. We've done a lot of dumb things at Berkshire. We have never told anybody that the number had to be this or that or to change anything. I mean, it just, once you start it, it's all over. You can't quit. It's like taking $5 out of the cash register. The first time you take the $5 out, you say, well, I'm going to put it back. And then do it a few times and you'll never stop. In fact, do it once and you probably never stop. But if something is going to be destructive, the thing to do is not start it. And forecasting earnings, I can't imagine anything more destructive. I got 360,000 people out there, and they know whether I'm lying or not, a good many of them. And they know if they send in figures and they get changed, what message are you telling them? We've got one dramatic illustration of that within Berkshire. And it's just, we want to, if you start lying, you got a big problem. It's that simple. And if you start saying to your team that somehow you've got a job, you've got shareholder relations, your job is to go out and tell everybody that our stock is the best thing among thousands of choices to buy every day. Well, that's crazy. And so what do you tell them? Well, they try to see which way the wind is blowing and figure out what they have to tell people, and then they go out and tell them. And then if you're a human and you've said we're going to earn $3.59 a share, you can get to $3.59. You can get there quite a while. And you can have audit committee, you have all these processes. But if you have a culture of lying, the processes really don't. They just disappear. And Charlie and I have seen it, well, every time we've gone on a board. But, Charlie, tell them about it.
Well, I think Berkshire's culture is going to last a long time after we're gone. And I think it should, and I think it'll prosper pretty well. The rest of corporate America is quite different. And it gets more different, I think, with each passing decade. And it's getting very peculiar. Pretty soon they're going to hold all the shareholders meetings online, and the shareholders won't even come. And it's getting very peculiar, and the index funds get more and more important in the voting. And it's like everything else in life. It changes, and not always in ways you like.
And it ends up for selecting different CEOs and all kinds of things. I mean, you're not going to appoint a successor CEO that's going to come in and said everything that's been done before is, it's been kind of fraudulent. I mean, if we needed to book an extra sale after the end of the quarter, if we needed to adjust the reserves, and it's once you start lying, it's all over. And I just don't know any way around that except to try every way you can to not. You sure can't. If you set the wrong example at the top, you got a real problem. We've never told anybody to change a figure. We never will. And if they had been changing figures, we'd be in all kinds of trouble because they know it and I know it and the next person would know it, and it just deteriorates. And we've really seen it. We've really seen it time after time. The way boards operate, it has to be process oriented. I mean, I understand the problems that Delaware has in writing a statute that judges face when they look at things, but it's extraordinary. It's just extraordinary what an emphasis on process can do to an organization because they think they can do anything if it's allowed, and eventually the foundation crumbles. Okay.